We are going to start the sit skill with our luring technique. So luring is taking the treat to your dog's nose, luring them into the position that you want, marking them the second they get into the position, and then following with the treat. So you can use your clicker for your marker, or you can use a marker word. I prefer the word yes, simply because I tell my dogs that they're good boys and good girls all the time. So I want a word that's going to have a unique meaning to them, and that's going to be the word yes. All right, so we're going to start out with, I have a treat in my hand, and we'll take it right to her nose. I'm going to bring it right above her head, yes. Her hiney hit the floor, so I mark and I reward. Now, to reset your dog so that you can do several repetitions, what I want you to do is release your dog. This is going to be something that we're going to use a lot when we start teaching your dog to stay. Now is a great time to go ahead and start using it, because when we teach sits and stay and downs, we don't teach them just for party tricks. They have to have a purpose. So when we do this, we teach them with a stay incorporated. So in order to teach a stay, we also need a release. So pick your cue now. You'll hear me say the word okay. A lot of people don't like to use the word okay because it's a word that they use a lot around the house. And so they don't want their dog to get confused. You can pick any words you want as long as you use it every single time, and as long as everyone in the household uses it every single time. So you could use something like release, free, break, anything you want. Just make sure, again, that you're using it consistently, and it's not a word that you use for something else. Like a popular thing is to tell your dog to get down off of someone. And then also when they lay down, you use the word down. So that's duplicating the word for two different skills. And we want to avoid doing that, especially at first. So I use the word okay, you use whichever one you want. The way you're going to release your dog is you're going to say your release word, and then you're going to toss a treat. Okay. So let's lure her again. Yes. And you're going to repeat this until your dog is looking really confident, like they're just pretty much going straight into that sit as soon as they come back to you. Okay. Yes. Another note is I want you to also, when you release your dog doing this, I want you to release them in different directions. Anytime you're working with your dog on anything, unless it is a behavior that we put several behaviors together, I'll explain more about this later. We want to avoid creating patterns. So if I always stand in this spot and I always release her in the same direction, that's going to become a pattern. That's going to be kind of what sit is. It's sit one time, release, come back, sit, release, come back. And that's not what we want. We want a dog that can sit in any situation, in any location. So what I'm going to start doing is you'll see me start to release her in different directions, and I'm going to move around a little bit on this mat. Okay. I'm going to release her here. I'm going to come over here. Yes. And you notice my lure doesn't have to be as obvious as it was. So it's time we can start adding that cue to the behavior. Okay. Sit. Yes. So what I did was I did the same thing I've been doing. I simply added the sit cue. Okay. Sit. Yes. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and start working on your stay if you like. Don't say stay. I would just put a little bit of movement into it. Yes. Just to kind of mix it up a little bit. We don't want to add too much at one time. But if your dog is able to sit and stay seated, it's perfectly okay for you to do that. And you see my movements are I'm just kind of moving back and forth. I'm not doing anything huge. Yes. But I'm also rewarding her for staying in place. Again, this is just to keep from creating any patterns. Okay. Okay. Now, after we've done this a few times, adding the cue onto the beginning, we can start teaching her the verbal cue by itself. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, sit. Yes. Now, if she had not sat down, I would have waited and then I would have cued her again. So a good rule of thumb is to say the cue, sit, and then count to 10 in your head. So you're not saying sit, 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 sit. That is the wrong thing to do. Or even a lot of people will say sit, sit. That's what your cue is going to end up being if you say that consistently. So the best thing to do is say your cue one time, count to 10 in your head. If your dog still has not sat, then say the cue again, count to 10 again. The third time, and I'm going to do this from her laying down because you can do it from any position, standing, laying down. So I'm going to tell her to sit, and if she doesn't sit, I'm going to count to 10 in my head before I say it again. Sit. Sit. I'm going to take a treat out. Sit. Yes. And you'll see after a while, your dog's going to catch on. If for some reason you feel like they just need one more cue and you're on the third cue, there's no rhyme or reason as far as 3 goes. It's just, you know, you want to give them enough time, but you don't want to keep hounding them about it. So if I thought she was making a movement to sit on the third cue, I probably would have waited and just tried it one more time and given her the cue again. So that's just something to keep in mind. You want your dog to be able to figure these things out on their own. Okay. That way they will learn it quicker and it'll stick with them longer. It's kind of like if we are learning a new job or a new task, if we can do it ourselves, maybe with some assistance, we're going to learn it faster than someone doing it for us and us watching. So we want to keep that in mind. Let our dog, you know, do these things on their own as much as we can and just provide them help when you feel like they need it. Right, Storm? Okay. So let's do some troubleshooting really quick. Just some common errors I see are not holding the treat close enough to your dog. So you may, if you have a dog that's super energetic in particular, this can be a problem. So I'm going to release you and I'm going to hold this treat up. So if I'm luring her, now she didn't do it, but typically when you do this, the dog's going to jump up or do something else to try to get the treat. So they're going to try to get it here and you're going to get frustrated because why aren't they sitting? I'm doing the thing. Why aren't they sitting? So remember, you have to keep it close to them in order to keep them down on the floor, okay? Okay. If you have a dog who is high energy, a big problem is keeping them in a sit. So what we do in those cases, a couple of things. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One is trying to use a higher rate of reinforcement. What do I mean by that? I mean, instead of just giving them one treat, you're going to pretty much shovel the treats, okay? And this is a temporary thing just to teach the dog. Sit. So this is what it's going to look like. Yes. 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 Okay. So you're going to release them before they have a chance to get up. So you're keeping them, they're learning that, hey, as long as I sit here, I'm getting rewarded for it. Then you release them and they'll hear that, okay, and they know they can get up. So they're learning this whole, it's kind of a pattern, but it's going to be a single skill pretty much. Sit, yes. So again, yes, yes. Okay. Don't always feed them the same amount of times. Change it up. Make everything that you can variable. So don't, feed them 2 treats, release. Feed them 2 treats, release. Keep it changed up some. Another thing that you can do, if you have a dog who's having a really hard time sitting or sitting and staying seated, you can use an elevated surface. Now they make elevated surface. There's one called the Climb. There's one called the Cato board. That one's a little bit less expensive, a little bit less cumbersome, I think. But all you need is an elevated surface. So the only thing you want to be careful of is you can use a piece of furniture. You want it to be stable, because if it's not stable, of course, your dog can get injured, but they can also get very scared depending on what phase of life that they're in, especially if they're an adolescent. Things can tend to scare them easier. Yes, good girl. So that's one thing you want to be careful with. It doesn't need to be elevated very high. The other thing is that you want to make sure that if you are having them get up on a piece of furniture, that you're going to be okay with them getting on a piece of furniture later. So for instance, don't get a chair that you don't want them to be in, but you use it for this, because it's going to be very confusing to them later. So, you can even make a platform out of some 2x4s and a little piece of plywood and just cover it with something, a little mat. But anything like that is helpful. And of course, the smaller the dog, the easier it is to find things for them to get on. So those are just some technical troubleshooting things. And of course, if you have questions about any of this, get in touch with us.